Well, Christian, I'm here outside the White House in what has been renamed Black Lives Matter Plaza by the mayor here, Muriel Bowser, a Democrat who has been extremely critical of President Trump's tactics here and his use of thousands of federal police, troops, Secret Service, FBI, prison officers even, to quell the protesters here in what has largely been peaceful protests over the past week or so. Today, a very much celebratory atmosphere. There's music playing all around. There are families here with their children. There is food and drink being distributed. There is absolutely no sense that things could turn nasty. And yet, looking around, you can see police strategically positioned on rooftops around me. Well, earlier, I caught up with some of these protesters around me. Let's hear from them now.
I'm here because what I see is wrong, and I don't want to have to be having this conversation years and years later with my children, like, because of your skin, you're a threat. I don't want to be telling my kids, because of your dark and your melanated skin, that you're going to die. You have to fear for your life when you're pulled over.
We just want equality. We just want fairness. We don't want to be judged by the color of our skin, and it's just hard because of the systematic racism that is in America.
It will make a difference. When I say it will make a difference, that's one of the reasons why I'm here, because if I felt like it wasn't going to make a difference, I don't think I would have came down today.
You know, we got to make a change in this country, and I'm down here making history, and I love it. Everyone is coming together, all nationalities. It's just a beautiful thing.
Meanwhile, in North Carolina, as we speak, a huge crowd has gathered, waiting in line to pay their respects at an open viewing of George Floyd's body, which has been taken inside a church. That will be followed by a private memorial service by the family only. Of course, all these protests, queuing in line for viewings, they've sparked a lot of concern that there could be a spike in coronavirus cases. Yesterday here, 24,000 new cases, over 900 deaths. And the White House top diseases expert today, Anthony Fauci, has said he is very concerned about a spike and is urging everybody here and around the world to wear these masks and keep them on at all times. Christian.
Siobhan Kennedy in Washington. Well, demonstrations in solidarity with the Black Lives Matter movement have taken place from South Korea to Sydney, from Paris to Berlin. In the UK, the message from ministers to those planning to protest was clear. Mass gatherings are banned to prevent the spread of coronavirus. But tens of thousands of people defied those warnings in many of Britain's biggest cities. There were plenty of faces covered, but as Aisha Tull reports, for many, social distancing was simply not possible.
George Floyd! Say his name! George Floyd! Say his name!
In London's Parliament Square, they chanted. In Manchester's Market Street, they clapped. And in front of the Haymarket Memorial Clock Tower in Leicester, they stood. Tens of thousands of protesters took to the streets across the country. They say for solidarity, for awareness, and for change. Despite the drizzly skies and the invisible but very present risk of COVID-19, they say they had to be here.
Because it's not right. There's injustice that's going on, and we need to be doing, everyone needs to be doing something about it.
Hopefully now a change will come. We're hoping for a change.
Like when Mark Duggan happened, I was 9 years old. Like there was nothing that I could have done then. But now that I am old enough to participate and be part of this, I really want to.
I just want all my people to come here and, you know, just show support, because we do deserve justice for our people. And I'm glad that everyone, all races, ethnicity, white, Asian, everyone, are coming together just to show support, and I'm loving that. I just want help for my people. I just want my people to be equal and justice for my people. That's it. That's all I want.
For over 2 months, Parliament Square has been really, really quiet. No one has been in the middle of London, and it's really odd to see so many people here. In that crowd, it's very hard to keep socially distant, but the people that I spoke to mostly had their masks on. And they told me that they want to make sure that they're here to make sure their voices are counted.
Once gathered outside the Houses of Parliament, some protesters started to march. A large group split and went towards the Home Office.
So it's important that I'm here for my people and for my children.
Once they got there, they knelt for 8 minutes in memory of George Floyd, whose death has sparked protests against police brutality and racism. Home Secretary Priti Patel had urged people not to attend and stick to coronavirus lockdown restrictions.
We are in a health pandemic across the United Kingdom, and coronavirus is a deadly virus. And of course, I'd say to those that want to protest, please don't. The regulations are very clear, in terms of gatherings and mass gatherings in particular. We must put public health first at this particular time.
But tens of thousands of people ignored those warnings today. Most of the protests were peaceful, but there were some arrests. And the statue of Winston Churchill was among buildings and monuments that were graffitied. Crowds in London continued to gather outside Downing Street and the US Embassy. And it's not just here in the UK. There were demonstrations in countries from Australia to South Korea. Back in Westminster tonight, protesters have confronted police, with standoffs still taking place. There are more rallies planned tomorrow.
And these are the live pictures now from Whitehall in London, where something of a standoff goes on between some of the protesters and the police. Well, earlier today, I took a camera down to meet the spoken word artist and rapper George the Poet outside at social distance. How did he feel about demonstrations during coronavirus restrictions?
It's a bit of a catch-22 when it comes to demonstrations during COVID, because ultimately demonstrations are a necessary show of support. It's what a lot of leaders and authorities and even the private sector will use to gauge the public mood. But every individual needs to make a choice about the risk that they may be part of, who you may, as someone who's strong enough to go to a protest and possibly withstand coronavirus if you catch it, who could you pass it on to? That question still lingers in our society right now.
How have you felt during the course of the week?
It's been a roller coaster. The last thing I want is this whole thing blowing over. I have drawn a lot of strength from Black Lives Matter. I'm happy Chauvin's facing second-degree murder. I empathise with the community. We're horrified. We also have police that seem to have impunity from homicide.
A lot of people wanted to challenge whether there were similarities between Britain and America. Yeah. Do you think that is being understood now?
I think it's always useful to get some uncontestable facts out into the public space to enhance the conversation that we're able to have, especially for those who are struggling to embrace the parallels. And I understand that this education isn't compulsory in this country, the history of race relations. So a lot of people are understandably, but not necessarily excusably, going to be late to the conversation.
As a news story, this will subside. The media will move on. So will the story go away?
When this news cycle moves on, the issue will fade from the public consciousness, but the lived reality of racism will persist in the black community as it has done since records began. So what we'll have to do is develop strategies that do not require the attention or the accommodation of people who are structurally ill-equipped to continuously address and dismantle the problem. And ultimately, that is going to have to, long-term, look like us organising our economic presence as an aggregate force against the effects of racism.
How do you do that? How do you organise your economic presence?
We organise our economic presence consciously already. We do it organically, it happens. Every community, every kind of community has economic patterns in whatever way you look at it. Right now, black men are experiencing double the unemployment rate of white men. That is an economic pattern. And when you look on a governmental level, there are strategies across industries in which there are targets. We can set our minds as a bloc, as a political bloc, to establishing these targets and disseminating this messaging across our already considerable network of influential black people in the media.
We are all brought up to believe that only a few people can be stars. Do you think more young black people should aspire to the music industry, to the sporting industries, to the creative world?
I don't think there's anything wrong with the aspiration to enter the creative world in front of the camera or as the sole performer. However, I also want to indicate that there are opportunities around those of us who make it to the forefront of media. There are teams, there are strategies, there are methods, cultures, traditions that, for example, in the field I'm in music, play out in our output, in what ends up being our contribution to GDP. In 2019, as Stop and Search increased among young black Londoners by 19%, in that same period, sales of rap singles grew by 20.9%, right? So we have opportunities and things that we can build more opportunity around.
What about the demonstration? What is the power of demonstration?
A demonstration is what gets remembered, right? Sentiments are invisible, but people in a space, visible. You can see and almost quantify how angry people are through a demonstration.